If you saw my most recent video, then you'll know that I recently acquired this vintage Singer sewing machine. The guy at the antique store told me that it was probably from the 1940s or 1950s. So naturally I got curious and decided to look up the serial number and see when it's actually from. And the answer is 1937. This thing is over 80 years old. All of that research really got my gears turning, and I thought, what if I make an outfit from 1937 on a sewing machine from 1937? However, the only way that I can do that is if this machine actually works, and I haven't plugged it in since bringing it home. So we're gonna find out today if this thing works, and if it works well enough that I could actually sew an entire project using it.
Yo, did it work?
I just plugged it in and it started running.
No way.
Look, watch.
Whoa.
But why is it just on like that? It shouldn't be. There must be a switch or something. Or like a pedal, you know? I can't just be that you plug it in and you have to just like shove stuff through it.
Well, maybe, maybe it's that this used to plug into a pedal and the pedal's missing.
Yeah, it could be that, but there's also this thing. Look, this looks like some sort of... Wait, okay, plug it in and then I'll press this and see what happens. Listen to the sound of it too. So it must be for your knee, right?
Here we go.
Yeah.
Plug it in?
Yep, plug it in. Okay, it does nothing. Alright, unplug it, I guess. Okay, for safety, I'm gonna take out the bobbin case underneath.
What are you taking
out? It
out?
smells.
Yeah, it really smells.
Yeah, it really smells. Okay,
What are you taking out?
I'll show ya. There it is. The bobbin case, which is like exactly what they still look like today. Like if you look at my machine, it has this exact same trapdoor.
Really?
Yeah, like the exact same way. I just never open it because I'm so used to like feeling it and just like going underneath like this.
Something does smell kind of gross.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Okay, but why does it just start sewing? That's the only problem here. Wait, maybe there's a switch back here on this thing. No, there's not. What does this do? Oh, it's the backstitch lever. To make it so backwards, it's up here. See that? Look where it is on my machine.
Definitely a different vibe looking at this versus that.
Yeah. But look, see the little trapdoor? And look what happens when I reach under. Look at them. Look how similar they are.
Oh wow.
Isn't that crazy?
It's like the same thing.
Yeah, look.
Yeah, that didn't really change at all over the years.
For like 80 years. I don't know, I might just have to play around with this for a little while. Or look it up online, maybe. So I did exactly that. I got a little flashlight like a detective to help me search in case I was missing something. I crawled onto the machine and looked up, and I just kind of generally poked around it for a while. None of this gave me any answers until I sat on the floor and examined the wiring. Then... Oh, I did it! Okay, so the sewing machine cable, power cable, is plugged in right now. This thing right here, this is a plug. And it was plugged in on the left side here. So if it gets plugged into the left side, which is where the power cable to the wall is, it just automatically starts running. But if you plug it into this side, where this cable goes to the knee pedal, boom! So all we had to do was switch the plug. Okay, yeah, this runs well enough that I'm pretty sure I can use it to sew an actual project. The next step would be to figure out how to thread it and hopefully replace this needle, or at least clean the needle because it's so rusty and dirty, and whatever I sew is definitely gonna get jacked up by the needle being like this. So I went ahead and removed the needle, as well as the presser foot, tension discs, and screw at the back of the machine. With all those little parts removed, I headed downstairs and made a paste out of baking soda and water. I submerged all the parts and then set a 2-hour timer. 24 hours later, I actually came back and took all the pieces out of the baking soda paste. I just kind of rinsed them under running water while buffing them with a dish sponge. And this all worked insanely well. Look how shiny these pieces are now. Except for the spring, I guess, but you know, you can't win them all. Before putting all my freshly scrubbed pieces back on, I decided that I should clean up the rest of the machine a bit first. I used a damp towel for all the painted parts, and then a sponge soaked in white vinegar for the metal parts. And this actually really worked. I used a Q-tip and a screwdriver with my sponge. And okay, while writing the script out, I actually, my hands literally just wrote out SpongeBob instead of sponge without me even thinking about it. So I used a Q-tip and a screwdriver with my sponge to get into the hard to reach little crevices. Then I got a little handsy with it and removed this circular piece of metal with filigree on it, which led me to realize that I could take the whole other metal piece off too. And holy crap, look how dirty this thing is inside. At this point, I stepped away from the machine and did some Googling because I am certainly not an antique sewing machine restoration specialist, but I read the blog of someone who is. Okay, so there's a lot more to cleaning this machine than I had initially anticipated. So I guess really what we're doing at this point is like a whole refurbishment. We're just going balls to the wall. I'm gonna do the whole thing. I'm gonna get it as clean as possible inside and out, and we're just gonna go for it. So I came back at it with a dry Q-tip first to knock out all the loose 80-year-old lint. I also found this 80-year-old straight pin just sort of chilling up inside there. How cool. The first step of my refurbishment was to soak all my newly removed rusty parts in another baking soda bath. Then I turned my attention to the internal mechanics. I used some more white vinegar to try to get rid of the nastiness on the inside of the machine case first. Then, the blog I read said to use a lightly abrasive sort of cloth and scrub down these two poles, which are responsible for the presser foot and needle lifting up and down, with sewing machine oil. I put the oil into a plastic cup and used a paintbrush to just brush it all over the place. I then just scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, and look how much better it looks after all of that. I continued to lube up all the moving parts that I could find with sewing machine oil, including these parts at the bottom. These are called rock shafts, and essentially what they do is move the feed dog and the bobbin case. These bits were tarnished for sure, but not nearly as bad as the upper mechanics. Once that was done, I felt real satisfied with where the body of the machine was at, so I went ahead and rinsed off all my pieces that were in the baking soda. Now all I had to do is reassemble everything, and oh my god, look at how shiny this metal piece is. I could cry. My god, this thing is looking so good. Now let's do some before and after. Let's go design an outfit. I've done a whole lot of deliberating about what I should make from the 1930s, and I've landed on an evening gown. Think old Hollywood glam, bias cut, slinky, body-hugging gowns. That is what we're making. And to do so, I bought an actual sewing pattern from the 1930s. 1931 to be exact. This is, of course, not the original. It's just a reproduction that's been digitized so I can print it here at home and use it. Now, am I a little bit nervous about this? Yes. Because the category of clothing that I'm probably least experienced in out of all of them is evening wear. Evening wear fabrics are slippery. They're expensive. They're delicate. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot going on, especially when we're bias cutting things, because that just means cutting everything on a 45-degree angle, and that's gonna use a boatload of fabric. But that's okay, because we're all about challenging my sewing skills here on this channel. So first step is to tape all these pattern pieces together and cut them out. So yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory. When you print out a pattern, you just lay it out in a grid following the numbers and letters and tape that bad boy together. But while I was doing this, Wyatt arrived home from a haircut.
Hey.
Dude, come upstairs!
Okay.
I'm so nervous.
Why?
How much hair is on your head?
Oh.
That's why I'm nervous.
I'm bald.
You're not bald. You wouldn't come home if you were bald. Where's the rest of it?
What, my hair?
Yeah.
I left it at the salon.
No.
Yeah. They're probably sweeping it up right now, dude.
Oh god, they're just gonna throw it in the garbage.
Yeah, dude.
Like it's trash. I mean, you do look handsome. I guess we'll have to see it styled.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't look great until there's product in it.
That's true. Your sweater's cute though.
My sweater?
Yeah. I don't know, I just love grandpa sweaters. But back to the dress. I taped the rest of my papers together and cut out the pattern pieces. Then it was time once again to head to the fabric store. I haven't exactly picked out what color I want for this dress yet still, but since we're just at the local fabric store and not like a good city fabric store, there probably won't be that many options. So, you know, we'll just have to see what they have. Sheesh, talk about putting my foot in my mouth. Look how many options they had. They were unfortunately all 100% polyester though, so they weren't like the best quality ever, but at least that meant I was gonna save some serious cash. Since I'm indecisive on a good day, I got pretty overwhelmed with all of the color options and also a little distracted with this cool tiger print sweater fabric. So I decided to pace around and use my phone a friend lifeline. The first and second votes I got back were solidly for green, followed by 2 votes for either the rust or the green. So I decided to pick the orange. No, I'm kidding. Of course I bought the green. All right, time to get cutting. I'm gonna do it on the floor because my table isn't quite big enough to lay the fabric on, and I'm also pretty nervous because this material is hella slippery, and I haven't worked with anything like it since my second year in fashion school. So I'm just gonna take it really slow and use both pins and chalk. I started laying out my pieces one by one and tracing them out with chalk as carefully as possible. The reason this fabric is annoying to work with is because it shifts out of place instantly at the slightest little touch, slipping right through your fingers like trying to hold on to an energetic hamster. But once this painstaking process was finally done, I could move on to what is usually my favorite part. Today is my first official sewing day on this project. Now, I know I'm sitting in like my desk corner and I don't normally sit here for these videos, but my USB extender for this microphone just broke, and I'm really hoping that that's not a bad omen for the rest of this day and or this project. That aside, I am a little nervous going into this because I haven't sewed any fabric with this machine yet. Obviously it turns on and it runs, and I've cleaned the needle off, cleaned off all the parts, but I don't actually know how it's gonna work. So I'm actually just gonna go ahead and thread my regular sewing machine as well as the old sewing machine, both with the green thread. And I'm gonna sew as much of this dress as I can on the vintage one, but for any little tricky bits or delicate parts, I'm gonna go ahead and use my regular modern sewing machine. So yeah, let's get to it. I started by threading the top of the machine, just to my best guess, but it did look pretty right to me. Then, since I only had one bobbin for this thing, I emptied it out so I could rethread it with green. As you can see, the vintage bobbin is a bit more thack than the modern one. I filled it using my regular machine since I wasn't really sure how to do it using the vintage one, but it worked totally fine. Then I got a little scrap of my dress fabric and did my first test. Okay, so that didn't work. I tried fussing around with both the bottom and top threads a little more before I finally realized the USB cable was, in fact, a bad omen. Perhaps I should have threaded the machine and not just turned it on when I tested it that first day. But I'm still glad I took it all apart and cleaned it out and refurbished it. Whether it will actually be sewing or not, it still looks a lot better and will probably last a lot longer now that I've done all of that cleaning and rust removal. The way a sewing machine works is a needle pokes down through the throat plate, through the feed dogs, to where there's another spool of thread called the bobbin below. And what happens down there is they get looped around each other and create a chain of stitches. So the needle goes down, loops around the bobbin thread, comes back up, moves forward a little, goes down, loops, comes up, moves forward a little. And every single time it does that is a new stitch in the chain. The machine basically just is not connecting with the bobbin thread underneath. This could just be that this machine is out of time, which means that the upper needle and the bobbin are not properly aligned to each other so that they can make that connection below. And sewing machine timing is something that you literally have to take it to a place and pay a guy to do it because it's pretty complicated and I don't know how to fix that. So at this point, it looks like we're gonna have to use the modern machine for the whole project, which I guess I'm disappointed about, but also somewhat relieved about because I was honestly pretty scared about having to sew an evening wear gown, which I'm already not super comfortable with, on a machine that is 80 years old. So yeah, it sucks that we're not really gonna be able to use it, but it was really cool to take it apart and refurbish it. I started off by sewing the front bust darts followed by the side seam. I left a gap open on the left side as instructed by the pattern, but instead of doing a quote continuous lap, which as far as I can tell isn't even a closure, I decided I'd put in an invisible zipper. And this is right about where things went from bad to worse. I already am not a fan of sewing invisible zippers on even like a basic cotton, let alone on this slippery hamster fabric. Oh, Lindsay, oh my god. This is not going smoothly at all. If I can just get this zipper in, I think Actually, I have no idea. I just need to get this. Oh my god, I remember exactly why this stressed me out so much when I was in university. I guess this is fine. I just need to sew it closer by hand and give it a good press, and I think it'll be okay. Why is this crooked though? Why is it?
So your sewing machine doesn't work?
It doesn't sew. It's out of time.
Yeah, when you said it's out of time, I was like, well then go to the grocery store and buy some time.
You think this is funny?
Once the zipper was finally done, I stepped away for a much needed break. Yep.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. This is exactly what I need.
Thank you. To finish the neckline, I sewed on some bias tape, then flipped it to the inside and hand sewed it in place. Just picking up with my hand sewing needle one little fiber at a time so that it would be barely visible on the outside. Next up, I sewed the flounce pieces together, the fuller part of the skirt that attaches below the knee. That then gets sewn to the body of the dress that I'd already prepped and top stitched. The next day, I came up and started working on this long piece in the back. I'm not actually sure what you'd even call this, but it's, that long strip that goes from the back of the neck to the hem. Just after sewing the facing to that piece, a friend stopped by and I had the best kind of distraction. Are you helping? After I absorbed all the cuteness I could, I got back to that long strip. I used my snips to create a bunch of little cuts along all the curved seams, which will allow them to lay flat once flipped. I gave this a real good press with the iron, and then it was time for a fitting. On paper, this dress was one size too big for me, but in real life, it was actually about 2 sizes too big for me, which is truthfully a good problem to have because if it was too small, I'd basically be screwed. But while wearing it, I figured out how much excess to trim out and also where to attach my straps in the front. Once I pruned the center back by a lot, I could top stitch on that long back piece. The first side was pretty chill because the dress could be laid open flat, but the second side was definitely a challenge. The second side was the last vertical seam. So now at this point, the dress was really becoming like one long closed tube. And as you're sewing it, it is literally getting in the way of itself. Once this was done, I gave it a good old press and moved on to hand sewing the straps in place. Now at this point, I sat down and was kind of rehashing the experience of making this dress and that it was challenging and all I had left to do was the hem, etc., etc. But I think it's really about time we just get to the final review.